Hi, everyone. You're watching DeFi Talks with DeFi Dad. Hey, so it is Tuesday, January 25th, 2022. Today, we're going to talk with Rich Cabrera, who is the co-founder of ReadyPlayerDAO. I myself am proud to say I'm a part of ReadyPlayerDAO, which is a gaming and I would call us an investment DAO as well, focused on the Web3 gaming space. I'm a part of actually RPD through an investment we made at Fourth Revolution Capital. I had kind of followed the team previously, tried to, of course, be involved in the Web3 gaming space, but you will learn today firsthand from Rich just the sort of asymmetric expertise that he and other members of the DAO have. So I can honestly say I have definitely learned more from all of you over the last few months than probably any other corner of crypto right now. So Rich, welcome. How are you doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Doing well. And I think I'll say that it's all a learning experience. So we're all still learning from all corners of the crypto space in the market.
Yeah, it's I mean, one of the coolest parts of our space right now is that there are so many actual DAOs, or let's just call them like other like decentralized communities of people who have similar interests. And RPD is really it's one community that is very, very focused on what has become like a very trendy space, understanding like Web3 blockchain based gaming. But there's just so much more to learn from those that have been here for a longer time and are, again, fully focused on the space. So anyways, Rich, why don't we start with your background? I actually don't know your background. What were you doing before all of this? Like, how long have you been in crypto? When did you start getting into blockchain-based gaming?
Yeah, so my background's actually in tech. Before this, I was a solutions architect at a company called Red Hat, and I was helping advise and modernize infrastructure and cloud computing systems for government agencies. So I worked with like Department of Justice, Department of State, NASA, and a few other smaller departments, USDA. And before that, I was working as tech lead, software engineer, etc. But during this time, I was always dabbling in crypto space. I've been dabbling with crypto since around 2013, where I was buying and selling Bitcoin, unfortunately doing more selling than holding, and learned my lessons very early. So since then, I've been focusing a lot more on Ethereum and how, dApps come into the space and play there, and DeFi. And then what really kind of drew my excitement and my passion was when I saw NFT gaming and play to earn gaming and what now I would like to describe as play and earn gaming start coming into fruition. And that's when I was like, all right, now this is something that I want to dedicate my time to, and it's something I'm passionate about. Let me try to find the best way to build on top of these concepts and provide value to the ecosystem there.
Yeah, and maybe you can walk us through then the timeline of like, I mean, I think it was August when you made the announcement on Medium about RPD, but I'm curious, like what led up to that? How, like, how much time were you spending planning out RPD before making the announcement? There's a lot of new founders in the space who are trying to figure out like how to do what you said, add value, start their own protocol, start a DAO.
Yeah, absolutely. So I personally got into Axie Infinity around April, and there was like 50,000 daily active users, right? And
Wow,
we're around like 2.7 million now. So the space has
crazy.
just gone exponential. And it was around, May, July. So around May is when I started my own personal guild. And through running that and seeing what's happening in the space, June is when things started really to start blowing up. In July, I was like, this is like a very interesting space, but it's a lot harder to get into if, one, you don't have time to manage a lot of these assets, to play the game, to work with people who are playing the game, which the name for those um, in the guilds is generally called scholars, but a lot of people are moving away from those terms. So the players, the community that you're building, there's a lot that goes into that. I don't know if you've ever ran a guild in any of the old classic games like World of Warcraft or RuneScape or any of those, but there's a lot of input into it, right? And running it correctly. And with the guild also comes investments, right? And I started to see a lot of this happening. We saw a lot of it with YGG and a lot of these larger guilds coming into space. And that's when I realized that there was a lot of room for this and a lot of people looking to get in, but they didn't know where to start or how to do that. And that's when we started talking about ReadyPlayerDAO. I started accepting investments, and a lot of smart people we got in the group Discord chat together and started brainstorming of how we can provide value and how we can shift things into a different narrative, become a beacon for people looking to get in the space, provide education, information, materials, content, tournaments, esports. And that's kind of where we're trying to get to today, right? And that's where we're starting to build out today.
Rich, why don't we back up a sec on how do you define Web3 gaming? Like this is still a term that a lot of people either they don't understand it or they clearly misunderstand it. Especially there's a somewhat contentious relationship with legacy gaming. But anyways, yeah, how do you think about explaining it like I'm five?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's layers of misinformation and misunderstanding, right? Like starting at the top layer of NFTs, there's the misunderstanding of it's just a picture, right? And then the NFT gaming, there's a misunderstanding that it's pay to play, right? There's a whole spectrum of how games can be developed in Web3, right? The games themselves can be developed anywhere from being completely on chain to just barely on chain, like just a token, right? Or just one aspect of an NFT and nothing else about the game being on chain. And then there's everything from as a game pass, so like an Axie, you have to buy the NFT to play the game. And then on the other side of the spectrum, there's free to play games where you're just playing the games and you're earning these NFTs that you can then sell. So there's a wide range of different ways we can apply the technology, the tokenomics, the NFTs, both fungible and non-fungible tokens to gaming to provide a better experience and allow people to own their digital assets and earn, right? So it's hard to, I guess, do an ELI5 without the person misunderstanding if you're trying to give a certain example. And I think that's where a lot of the issues come from.
Yeah. I have to say, of all the founders that I've met with you now and just in my own separate conversations, I definitely find that the most common theme with new founders that are working on a game that is built on a blockchain, they talk a lot about this is a game that will be community owned, which we're still really early in this this growth of Web3 based gaming, but that seems to be I think the warm and fuzzy the mission, that this is a game that gamers ultimately will own in-game assets. They should benefit from the upside of the success of the game. But I guess also, who do you think among the different Web3 based gaming, who has done this the best so far? Maybe you could talk about a few different examples of teams that you've worked with through RPD, because the reason I ask this is I think it does at times parts of Web3 based gaming, I recognize it creates a different sort of incentive. I'm thrilled for the person who was I just want to play games my whole life. And, I had to like figure out all these other channels. And if they can in the future figure out a way to make a living playing games full time, being like an evangelist, like that's cool. But I also have thought a lot personally about if we are paying someone to play a game, like when does that no longer become fun? When is that no longer like a great story to tell? So I think it's better for now to think about like which games have really had the most success, or maybe who do you think is going about enabling play to earn to truly be like a sustainable way to play games?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to the whole spectrum thing, right? So I've seen something like Play Blancos where you just go and you play this game and you earn these skins, or you can purchase these skins. So if you look at the data from most games that have skins today, right? So like Apex and Call of Duty and all this other stuff, there is some data that was put out that about 40% of the skins purchased never get used. So imagine if you purchase a skin and you don't end up using it and you decide you're just going to sell it, right? Currently, that's very difficult to do unless the game itself allows you to do so. With NFTs, it'd be a lot easier to do. So that's kind of like a very dumbed down EL5 of where we can see the benefits. And why I'm bringing this up is because you mentioned if we're paying people to play games, right? We're not actually paying the players. And I think this is the largest misconception. Microsoft isn't coming out and buying Blizzard because they want to pay players, right?
Yeah.
But what Blizzard and Activision and all these other AAA game studios want to do is enable players to own their assets so that they can sell and buy the assets through themselves. And then how does the studio make money? It's going to be through those transaction fees, right? So that's a lot of how the blockchain works, and how royalties work with a lot of NFTs that we see out there today. And we're just going to, I think, start to see this being brought into gaming as well. And I think as this space grows, it's also going to be less play to earn, like you're mentioning, where it becomes a job, and more play and earn. So I think we're going to want to see a shift off of, hey, go to, for example, this GameFi game called DeFi Kingdoms, where you're essentially doing DeFi as a gamified experience. We might see a shift away from that and towards, hey, let's go do this dungeon raid with all my friends, have this ton of fun, and like, we all might make $100 while we're doing it. Just because we could, if we are successful in this dungeon raid, we could get this mythic legendary armor, which we can either keep and show off that we completed this raid and are playing and having fun and doing these hard levels, or we can sell it once we do the next hard level, right? And we're not using that armor anymore because we got a better one. So instead of having this massive inventory of skins and guns and all this other stuff that I'm only one person, I don't use, I can sell them, I can rent them out to scholars, like if there's an earning capability to them, or just hold on to them like I usually do. So it gives the ability to make decisions which we didn't have before.
Yeah. I think there is a misunderstanding about like how broken that old system is. And like, I mean, I'll just paint it in a very like black and white way. The old system is, all value is accrued to the game creator, whatever the company is behind that game. And then there's different channels that have been monetized thanks to, things like Twitch. I guess what's wrong, with being able to create secondary markets that allow people to trade, unique in-game assets that they've earned. I mean, what's the big deal? So like I've really struggled to empathize with some of the like the contentious sort of like pushback, and I would say hatred at times, like, towards this space. I'm like, we're not trying to ruin gaming. We're not trying to like destroy the joy of just playing a game. I mean, you can do that, but I mean, what's the hurt in creating a system that potentially rewards those who are playing versus it all just being accrued to that one centralized entity. And I think, like, to put a cap on this, this is why there's so many gaming developers who are like rushing into the space. They're like, that's cool. Like, why wouldn't we reward those who really have like made our game successful? Like, that's the community there of gamers and evangelists and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's kind of with every fundamental change in any market, right? So like when the internet came to be, like no one wanted to put their credit card on any sketchy random website, right? And there's this FUD and fear around doing that. With Uber, getting in a car with a random person sounds insane until you realize the value add there. So I think this is just part of a lot of that. And people tend to see misconceptions and tie into them until they've actually experienced the reality of the situation and they fully understand how things can be different. And the other problem is with something that's so new and so radical, you're going to see a lot of people attempt to do things and fail. And we're going to see, I think, a lot of that over the next 2 to 3 years of games trying to build successful play and earn economies. Economies are hard, right? Just look at the inflation rates in the US today. Look at, things that are happening, et cetera. It's not easy. So we're going to see a lot of failure, and a lot of people from the outside are going to say, look, it was a scam. Look, it was Ponzi, and, things they're saying about Axie right now. But the issue is, that's just the nature of, something radical and a fundamental shift and change in new technology and how things are going to be approached. And on the other side, we're going to see, I think, successful tokenomics, successful play and earn mechanisms, and ways that we can find the balance of rewarding players. It may not be full, tokens directly for playing. It may not be all the way back to just skin ownership, right? I'm sure it'll be somewhere a little bit in between, or find a balance to where people aren't just grinding for money, but they're actually playing and enjoying, and spending time to have these experiences with their friends, etc.
Before we talk more about a day in the life of RPD, because I want to help others to understand, like, how does ReadyPlayerDAO function as an investments DAO / gaming guild, however you want to classify us. But can you talk a little bit about what are some of the tokenomics within Web3 based gaming that you think are working well, or like maybe like highlight some examples from different games where it's like, this is a repeatable practice that we should expect other new games to copy or emulate?
Yeah, so with tokenomics, I think one of the things you have to look at and you have to keep in mind is that people have differing personality styles and personality traits and player styles. So the way you play games is going to be different than the way I play games. So the incentives that I'm looking for, the sinks and the burn mechanisms that will work well for me are going to be different for you. So the number one thing I think that effective tokenomics are going to have is going to have multiple sinks that drive different types of incentives, right? So, skins, wraps, cool guns, that's like a clout / social incentive, right? People want to show off what they've earned in the game, because they are a good player, or because, for whichever reasons they put up the money to purchase it, etc. Then there's going to be people who don't care about that, and they're just looking for a good experience in the game, right? They want to spend time with their friends. They want to enjoy playing the game, and you're going to need sinks that, build that experience, change the experience for them, modify the experience. So like Apex Legends, for example, you can change the experience that you have in game depending on the legends that you're using to play the game. So one person who's spending money on skins and wraps might care less about the character they're using and more about how flashy it looks, while another one might care more about the variety of characters and play styles he can play to, and less about the skins and wraps that each one has. And you'll see that in games like Skyrim, for example. People go back and do completely different run-throughs with different builds because they want a different experience. So I think, to answer your question, I think we're going to see cosmetic burn mechanisms for that social and clout. We're going to see experience-based mechanisms, so like changing the way the game is played for you, the time that it's spent there. So like for example, there's the mounts in World of Warcraft, right? You can reduce the time it takes to do something or to get somewhere. Those are, I think, are going to be seen as, burn mechanisms, incentive structures. And then obviously financial, we talked about like ways to make more money, earn more through the game, through playing the game. And then other kinds of advantages. So like consumables, boosters, like improved sights on a gun, right? People pay for like aimbots and stuff like that. Some of these incentives are going to have to be well balanced and thought through extensively. And that's the next step in the tokenomics, right? So like step one is think about how you want to balance the economy. So mint rate and burn rate needs to stabilize somewhere. So at some kind of price point. And that's going to be derived through the player base. A lot of people think that Axie Infinity can just up and change the SLP price. They can't, right? That's not how it works. It's an economy. So there has to be buy side and sell side pressure, right? And that's where you're going to find the balance of the cost of the token. So there needs to be more incentive structures for people to buy the token so that they can burn the token. And that's where these burn mechanisms that I'm referring to, and these incentive structures and how it needs to apply to different types of people and different personality styles. Like if the burn mechanism was go to a bar, the introverts would never use it and the extroverts would love it. So you need to have both of those. And then how you balance them and how they're tied into games. 1KX put out a great article that looked historically into, good token sinks and bad ones through games, because this isn't the first time games have had economies, right? And they kind of review like community feedback on what they enjoyed as a burn mechanism, what they enjoyed as a sink, and what just was the worst thing ever. So a lot of that balance and nuance and how it's introduced to the player base and how it's interacted with are all things that need to be taken into consideration. They're very important.
I feel like you started to touch upon this, but I just was thinking about how do you think about scarcity within in-game tokenomics then, which maybe you can kind of give us like the TLDR on some of what 1KX shared, but yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Because this is something I've always struggled with, thinking like you want the game to be as accessible as possible for all. In fact, a really simple example, having been really involved in Parallel, is Parallel's a trading card game. You want people to be able to build decks when the game goes live, to be able to play the game.
Yeah.
But there's a scarcity aspect there, and that early adopters and collectors love, and they're helping to sort of bootstrap this game through the royalties that Parallel earns on those trading cards. So it feels like something it's like a tug of war between like, we want it all to be accessible, but we want to reward the early adopters. We want to be able to bootstrap the game. So anyways, how do you think about all that?
Yeah, so that part's very difficult, right? And I think that's a lot of what we see with these games, and we're going to see, and why I think we're going to see a lot of the people who are looking to earn just going to be jumping from game to game through these hype cycles. And I think this is something that the next successful game is going to have to solve, because hype cycles are very detrimental to the game and the community. So we saw this first with Axie, right? And we're kind of seeing this now with Pegexy, and we're seeing a lot of rumbles about it on crypto Twitter. But essentially, you have that supply shock. So the game starts off, right, and there's a small amount of people playing, and there's a small amount of assets to play with, right? And then people start to realize that there's a good earning mechanism, and they want to get in, and demand spikes. And there's the supply shock still because there aren't enough people making more assets, just because the current state of a lot of these games is you have to like breed or summon or whatever you want, the game is calling it, merge two NFTs together to create a new one. And that isn't happening at a fast enough rate for the demand of incoming players. And so you'll see the price of token, the price of NFT assets spike up high. Everybody's getting in. And then all these people are now breeding because it's so profitable. And then you have a supply shock where everything gets dumped onto the market and price plummets, SLP plummets. And this is why I think we're going to start seeing games that don't have this pay to play buy NFT to play game, because that isn't that healthy. And like you said, it's rewarding just the early players. They turn into these whales where they can own like 30% of the game's assets, which is absurd for any game, period, right? And I think that's very much going to be something that is going to start to be avoided because of those issues, right? And people losing money in your game leaves a bad taste in their mouth, and most of them won't come back to that game. So it is very finicky, and I know a lot of games, so like no disrespect to any of the games that are out there now that do it this way. Yeah. I'm just curious to see if this balances itself out in the future. If there is going to be other games that are going to avoid this model in the future, or how it's handled. And I think generally we're going to start seeing a more free to play with earning mechanisms beyond that in the game.
Yeah, I want to say or summarize what you're saying is, despite all of the good intentions to create more access for anyone to be able to play a game and benefit from like the growth and success of the game, a lot of the problems that we set out to originally solve, they arise in a new form. And so you have like that was a great example about like, what if some entity owns 30% of the in-game assets? Well, if that entity turns out to be this very benevolent, player, like a good actor, then the game would probably benefit from it. But I mean, where does that leave us? It leaves us in a very similar place to the legacy system, where we were, playing a game, and some very large, or not very large, but some centralized entity, the creator of the game owns everything, and we're just kind of happy to be along there for the ride. So it's a lot of tug of war between like opposing ideas. But my argument has been that this is like our best chance though of figuring out a solution, like that, like the old system, I would argue clearly doesn't work, that there is like a better way. And,
right.
And that's what the space here is about, experimenting. The other problem that arises is that what makes it into the headlines is, the most, the most obvious dumb story about like people getting rich off of owning NFTs, or someone's playing a game and they've become a multimillionaire from some of the NFTs that they're holding. The space is early still, there's less participants. And so, yes, there's potentially a tremendous amount of upside, but you also can lose, what might have gone up for some in-game assets they earned. If those assets fall, I feel like the news story becomes so-and-so lost $1 million. And it's like, but what about the fact that those assets were earned in the first place playing in the game? And, we're also measuring over a very short period of time. So anyways, it's very, to me, like if you want to, earn a living playing with play to earn games, you have to have a long-term sort of mindset to think that like, well, I could be playing multiple games and some of these assets are going to do well. Some of them are not, because some of these games are going to do well and some of them are going to fade to be, irrelevant.
Yeah, and there's
Anything else? Oh yeah, go ahead, Rich. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say there's pros and cons to it, right? So the other side of the story is, the way it's done in that state is you don't need as much VC funding. You don't need all the money to go back to, like you said, the legacy system, the centralized organization. It goes to the players, and like that person is probably a player that owns a lot of those original assets. So there's like pros and cons. There's toss-ups, and I think like a lot of the conversation in the space is like, oh, is it just VC backed all over again, or is it community backed? So I think that's worth a conversation as well. And then how it's handled and how you can stabilize a lot of the growth of those assets is, I think, time-based assets, different types of assets where we see rarity help hold the value, where collectors can come in and want some of, these other assets as well. And I think I mentioned Play Blancos as like free to play, earn NFT, sell NFT, that you earn through, longer playing, and more collaborative playing and achieving different things. And they do the classic battle system. So if you don't get to the most rarest asset within the time frame of that battle system, you can go buy it, but it's never going to come back again. So that's a way that's leveling the worth of that NFT, right? It's a little bit different than a lot of what we've seen elsewhere. And that's something I could see Parallel doing as well, right? So like, what if they come out with this certain card that has a certain stats, and it has some sort of rarity, but you can only get it if you win or complete a certain amount of matches, and then that's it. It's gone after that season of Parallel, right? The only way to get it is to go back and purchase it from someone else. But then this season also has, maybe it's similar card, but there's a little bit tweak, a little bit different. And maybe there's ways to burn cards to increase the rarity, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's a lot of solutions. So I don't think this is an inherent issue with any of the current games. I just think there needs to be some kind of balancing to it.
Yeah, no, makes sense. And this sort of dovetails into that thinking. Can you walk us through, like, how do you, you're meeting with founders every day. How do you go about assessing a game and whether or not you would recommend RPD investing in it? Like, what's basically, if you can kind of walk me through like an investment memo of a game and why you might say this is going to be more valuable than the other Web3 based games.
Yeah. So a few of the things that I like to see is originality, right? So I've seen tons of games come out and say, hey, we're literally the same thing as Axie, but we just changed a few things that we want to make a little bit better. And I'm like,
that makes me want to vomit in my mouth hearing
that.
Like that's like, okay, no thanks.
Yeah, so like that's one thing. Be original and try to build something that you are passionate about in a way that the founders, see that they would enjoy playing, not because they've seen someone else do it and they're like, this but green, right, instead of blue. Another thing is how much time and thought have they put into balancing the tokenomics. Have they done research into other tokenomics systems and why they don't work, and have they done their due diligence on the numbers of like historical games and how players have treated assets in those games, and are they using that information to build out their game? And then lastly, how much focus are they spending on making a fun game and how much focus are they spending on making money, whether it's for their players or for themselves. So between those three things, I think you can kind of come to the realization of like who's going to last and who's not, who's trying to build something sustainable, and who is playing the hype cycle, which we've seen a lot of the latter. And the people that are playing the hype cycle aren't going to be here if this crypto winter lasts a year, right?
Yeah.
So that's
Can you
kind
give
of
an example of maybe a recent investment that sort of checks off all those boxes? That doesn't have to be a name that folks are familiar with, but just kind of give you a chance to talk about one project that that we invested in lately through RPD.
Yeah, so I'll give two. One's big time that we invested in. I did a Twitter Spaces with them back in December, and they've really gone out and hired people from, Web2 studios, developers, leads, creatives, etc. And they're saying, look, we want to build a successful game. You guys have built successful games before. They have people from like Gears of War, Blizzard, Activision, like all these other game studios that have worked on different games, and say, you guys know what it takes to build a successful game. And we're bringing our experts from Web3 who know how to work with tokenomics and NFTs and burn mechanisms. And their focus has always been, let's make something fun, and then let's allow the players to earn while having fun. So I really like what they're doing. And then another one that we talked to recently is Crypto Unicorns as well. So they've thought through a lot of the different burn mechanisms. They're going to have different little game modes, which I think is what we're seeing starting to come out a lot. Is where you have different game modes so that different types of players can come in and earn in the way they see fit and the way they want to earn and play the games they want to play. And the other thing, and the thing is that I like about Play Big Time is it's free to play as well, right? Crypto Unicorns is not, so I am curious about and how that'll play out. So a lot of these games right now are white papers. A lot of them aren't built out yet. So, of course, everybody do your own research. But in a lot of the methods and things they're trying to build out are still being discovered. So this is very new. So in the difference, I think, in the space is we're seeing a lot of games built in the open, which we don't see in Web2 games.
Yeah, that's such a cool part of that's something like I want to say I was celebrating that many months ago, and I feel like I almost like have forgotten about that perk that just you get to see every like little detail. The best teams are just constantly releasing like day to day, like it could be a sketch or mock-up of like a new character or skin, whatever it is. It's just really fun. You feel like you're intimately involved. You can give immediate feedback. I know a lot of founders we've spoken with, they talk about the joys of just having unrelenting amounts of feedback, because in the old world, I don't think it was as simple. There's a lot of, I would argue that they probably just couldn't share those sorts of updates because it was like considered sensitive information, but it's just a different way of building.
But there's also other reasons too, right? Because in game alpha, the game's not finished, right? And a lot of people tend to forget that when they've been playing it for Axie, they've been playing it for months. And Axie talks about how they still have land play and they have these other phases and they have more burn mechanisms coming. And people tend to forget that this is still early stage. There's still stuff being developed. There's still stuff being made. Games take years to develop, right? And I think it's very different in this space. And Axie kind of set that precedent, which we haven't seen anywhere else, of like games being active develop. Like when Axie first started, it was click button and auto battle, right? And then now you have the cards, and then next we're gonna have, another aspect, and like the game's gonna keep evolving. The game now is not what the game was a year and a half ago, right? And the game Axie is not going to be the same a year and a half from now, and that might upset some people. It might make people happy, and I think that's part of the reason why they didn't do it in Web2, because gamers are pretty harsh. Like they will lay it on you, and they will claim a game is dead before the game is finished being developed, right? So there's a lot of that to take into consideration as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap between the gaming and crypto community. Just very very quick to hoist you up as a legend and our savior, and then very quick to throw you down and trample on you and consider you kicked out of the community. It's a balancing act for sure. I'm thinking, Rich, in the future, we'll have another conversation more about like the day-to-day of RPD. This was wonderful. I feel like we got to really more hone in on like the landscape of Web3 based gaming, the sort of asymmetric information you and others have in ReadyPlayerDAO. I am though like very keen, especially like maybe around like the 1-year anniversary of RPD, to talk about like lessons learned from running a DAO the past year. I can tell anyone here, like it is just wild, like what you would have operated under at Red Hat, what I had in like past careers. You see a similar sort of structure. It's just that I would say it's more flat, but then like clearly like people arise that are a little more respected for like having stronger opinions. But the coolest part about RPD is just like the aligning of incentives, and that like everyone is at this point, having contributed Ether or an investment in some other form, you're there sort of working together, and you're there because at the end of the day, like you're looking to invest in games or gaming assets that you think are undervalued compared to where the space is going. But I want to leave you with like the last word here. Then, like anything else you think is worth sharing that you really want the masses to understand about Web3 based gaming, blockchain based gaming, where we're at, kind of where we're headed.
Yeah, I touched up on it before, but we're all still learning. This is a very new concept. Things will change and evolve and improve, right? And I do think 90% of the games being developed might not make it, right? And the concepts and the approaches that they have to play to earn, play and earn, GameFi, whichever way you want to call it, they might not be the optimal solution. It may not be what comes out as the approach in 5 years, right? So I would say be open-minded, be patient with the development and the changes that are happening in the space, because nothing's perfected and nothing's figured out yet. And that's kind of the approach that I'm taking to a lot of the games, and why I think you'll probably see me talk a lot on my Twitter about the roadmap and the future of the game, and less about the current state, because that's where we're heading and what should be, the final decision and judgment being made on. And a lot of these games, I went back and reviewed a game that I passed on a few months ago, just today, and they've completely changed their tokenomics and made me more bullish on them.
Yeah.
So those things happen.
Yeah. Oh, I can speak to that experience. I've definitely done that and been like, oh wow, like they made the changes I was hoping they were going to make. Why did I not tell them at the time? But that actually speaks to, I think, there's always a desire to just, you want to like work with, collaborate with people who you believe in. Everyone's looking for like that magic formula of like what tokens to invest in this space. But I think it goes back to like really basic principles that, get talked about in traditional, let's say like venture investing, or just whatever. If you've written an angel check, whatever stage of company, you want to work with people that you believe in, that you think can like realize a mission, that can like sell other people on that vision, and then actually execute on it. And there are definitely some remarkable founders that are flooding into this space. But some of those founders too, like it could be the timing of the market. It could be just like we're so early in this space. And I'm excited for some of these amazing founders to fail, because once you fail, you learn something, and then hopefully you move on to that next project. That to me, actually, nowadays, I am just so excited anytime I talk with a founder who has already failed at something in the space. In fact, the more times they failed, the more interested I am in like, this is great. This person has made all these mistakes already.
Experience.
Exactly. Yeah. We tend to like glorify, like the few outlier success stories, but I think most of those folks, like if you dig deeper, you find that they've had a, already like a challenging journey, and that's why they are where they are today. Rich, if anyone wants to get involved in ReadyPlayerDAO, any recommendations here? Like I've been flashing to make sure they follow ReadyPlayerDAO on Twitter, of course, and they can learn more at readyplayerdao.xyz. But any other call to action you want to share?
Yeah, no, just, follow our Twitter, join our Discord. We have a community Discord. It's been a little quiet as we've been building, but we're planning to do some more in there. And that's how we're going to start involving more of our community, because, we are a DAO, and we need to have community involvement and allow them to participate in the DAO itself, right? And that's kind of our next step for us. So we're wrapping up essentially what's phase 1 for us, and going into phase 2 of let's bring in the community and allow them to make decisions and help move things around the DAO and do some governance voting and things like that.
Awesome. And reminder, you don't need to buy a token to get access.
Yeah, there's no token at a time. There's no purchase to access the Discord. So be wary of scams. The Discord link will be in our bio.
Yeah, if you see a ReadyPlayerDAO token, it's fake. So that's at least as of Tuesday, January 25th, 2022. Who knows what the future holds? But
we will, if anything changes, we will formally let you know through our Twitter. So
exactly. Cool. Well, hey, I'm going to end the broadcast here in a sec. We'll be back in a green room, and just thanks everyone for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this. I'll actually be back tomorrow to interview the co-founder of Syndicate, which is a protocol that enables like investment clubs. It's a really cool concept, but be a pivot away from some Web3 based gaming here today. And Rich, just thanks so much for your time, man. This was a total pleasure to get to like dig into what you think about day to day. And everyone, if you enjoyed this, subscribe at DeFiDad.com. And there's lots of other videos, tutorials, and interviews there. So thanks everyone.